Good evening and many thanks for joining us here on Front and Center here on NTV. Be sure to keep on this conversation also online on www.ntvkenya.co.ke. Tonight we continue to keep an eye on what's happening in politics and governance in the country as the four presidential candidates continue to traverse the country to drum up support for their causes across the country. A couple of days, 25 days to be specific, to the August 9th general election. And we want to keep an eye on the President, Uhuru Kenyatta's final few weeks, should be final 3 weeks or so in office before that transitional election. I'm joined in studio tonight by lawyer and political strategist Kipchumba Karori, lawyer and nominated member of Parliament Jennifer Shamala, and lawyer and political analyst Joy Mdiva, as well as communication strategist and political analyst Mark Bichacha. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for joining us on Front and Center tonight.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for inviting us.
All right, we want to talk about the president, what he has been up to over the last couple of days, and seems to have hit the campaign trail quite in a big way, drumming up support for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential flag bearer Raila Odinga. Let's listen in to what he said yesterday on the campaign trail in Samburu.
Kwa huo muda ambaye mmenipatia, nimefanya yale ambaye nimeweza. Na mimi sasa nataka kuunga mkono wale watu kama hawa nimewatajia hapa, ambao wataweza kuendeleza hii kazi. Si ni kweli? Na mimi nataka niwachie hata hii kiti niko naye. Niwachie huyu mzee anaitwa Raila na yeye pia asukume.
All right, that was yesterday in Samburu. A few days earlier, he was in Nairobi issuing title deeds in that national titling program that he has been up to across the country. And he also did drum up support for the Azimio presidential candidate Raila Odinga. So Pandit saying he's going all out in his final few days in office to campaign for his preferred presidential candidate. Again, another subject of massive debates across the country over whether or not the president should do that. And as part of what he has been doing also, he has been, or the state has been in a tussle with Kenyatta University over some 410-acre piece of land. We'll get into that later on. But Mark, to just start us off, again, this question has been asked so many times. Is it proper for the president, an outgoing president, to campaign for one of the candidates? Ben, what's your take?
Thanks for having me, and that's a critical question because it ties itself to many arguments. First is a constitutional argument that many have argued that the president, as a symbol of national unity, should ensure that in every election in which he is not a candidate, he should remain neutral. Secondly, it's a question also again of the constitution, asking the question that does a president lose his civic and his political rights by virtue of being a president? Isn't he allowed to express himself in whichever manner he sees fit?
Right.
The third is the argument that then is it deemed that state machinery is being used to campaign for a certain candidate versus not another. Now, to answer these questions, we must be very pragmatic. Number one, to say that the president is divisive in campaigning for one person is to say that our democratic process is divisive. The process of democracy is not supposed to divide a people. It is a people coming together to make a decision, because if it was divisive, then whoever loses or wins, this country should remain fragmented. And one of the mature things that we need to do is that democracy needs to allow people to have their way and others to have their say. The second issue about whether he loses his political rights, I do not think so. Obama, when he was in office, campaigned for Hillary Clinton. Why? And why do we campaign for the people we campaign for? We campaign because we have ideologies and ideas that are similar. So
there's a precedent even?
Yes.
All right.
So it is not something that is doing that is outside of the construct. Now, secondly, the issue of government machinery does not hold water, because we know for a fact the deputy president himself holds political rallies and meetings within the precincts of his dwelling, of his official residence. So all of these things, in my view, Ben, no, I don't think the president is wrong.
Many points. Joy, what do you think? Does the fact that those who say that the fact that he is campaigning against his own deputy makes a difference. What do you think?
Well, he's been against his own deputy for a while. That's not a secret. And in fact, if he turned around and started campaigning for the deputy, it might be a problem. My issue with this is not even whether the president can or cannot, because obviously under Article 38, he is free to exercise his political rights as he deems it fit. Only as being commander-in-chief, his stature, you would imagine that he will be at a level where he's offering reassurance that there will be stability, there will be a smooth handover. You would expect that that is the tone with which he would be trying to lead the nation, rather than in this tone. Because if peradventure after August 9th, his preferred successor is not picked, then where does that leave him? Is he a leader without a vision? Is he a leader without direction? Then some of the language that has been used, sitaachia mtu, my preferred successor, you know, it has connotations of sounding like almost it is up to him, and yet it is up to Kenyans. Right. So that doesn't sit very well with some of the, a section of the society. In my opinion, the president has the right to do whatever it is he wants to do as a political and as a private citizen. However, in this particular instance, given the nuances that have been there with the undercurrents with him and his deputy, right, it is expected that he does, because you would imagine that in his handshake deal with Raila, campaigning for him was part of the package deal. Right. So the argument might be even that he has not done enough in terms of going out for Raila. But in my opinion, what he has done, because of the weight of his statement whenever he speaks, a little goes a long way. It's like salt or like a chili cube. A little goes a long way. So even if he does 2 or 3 rallies, it counts for something in the handshake deal that I will actually front you as my preferred successor.
Right. Mheshimiwa, your party leader has said that he will work until his final day. Do you think there's a danger of him leaving the country in not a very united state?
Oh, for a moment I thought you said there's a danger of him leaving the country. That's how I was wondering where he's going. That's why I was looking at you like that. I was a bit surprised. Yeah. You said that there's a danger.
Tumba says he's leaving to Shaweri.
Yeah, but
he has a home where he needs to go back.
All right.
First of all, the president has every right to express himself. He has freedom of expression. Second of all, every president subsequent to multi-party democracy has had a favorite candidate. When President Moi, when we entered, his favorite candidate was Uhuru Kenyatta. Right. Kibaki's, when he finished his term, it was quite clear that his favorite candidate was Uhuru Kenyatta. So it's the style in which it is done, and they have that right. And I think that Joy did say, and I very respectfully want to disagree with you, that it would maybe have been part of the handshake. I do not think personally, I could be wrong, that at the time that His Excellency the President entered into the handshake with the Right Honorable Prime Minister, it was on the table that he would support him. I think there was a sequences of events that then led to him supporting the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. Having said that, I also feel that, and speak because, and we know because our constitution acknowledges God Almighty, we're a country and we're a spiritual country. We had our first liberation, we had our second liberation. I think that His Excellency is seeing much further than we can even imagine. And I think it was precipitated by events, and with all due respect to His Excellency, the Deputy President, who started his campaigns early, and I'll leave that, it was probably strategy and perhaps good strategy at that time. The President of the Republic of Kenya, and those are my personal opinions, has felt that it's very personal to me that he has reached a point and that this country needs a final healing. And we cannot have this healing. And often they say in African traditions, even in biblical traditions, that it is done by the sons of those, you know, where the grievances began. So I see that there's a deeper, and I feel a deeper, which was precipitated, of course, by the other events, a deeper reason as to why he has pushed and preferred this particular
candidate. I think he recognizes that the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga deserves his place in the history of Kenya.
All right, fair enough. But our Kili, what Mesh is saying, some of the people that you support have called those things dynasties. What is your take? What do you think the impact will be on the president being so bold in his final weeks on the campaign trail?
Thank you, Ben, for the opportunity. I think what we need to look at, the question is both a moral and a legal question. Morally, it will be on the place of Uhuru Kenyatta to take a higher step as a statesman, as the father of the nation, and to allow the normal motions to take place. That is when you look at it from a moral standpoint. But when you come now to what my both seniors have addressed, the legal issues, is that under Article 38, he has his political rights, he has the right to choose where he stands politically. But you know, now he occupies a unique position as the head of state. And when you talk about, and when you listen to how Uhuru Kenyatta talks about presidency, you will assume it is a kitimoto he came with from Ichaweri, that he has the right to pass to the next person. Because when he say ntawachia huyu, ntawachia ule, if you are a visitor in this country, you will think there is no voting that will take place on the 9th about the presidency. It will be on just the senses of Uhuru Kenyatta passing it over. But coming back to what you have asked about the issue of dynasties and what have you, you know, where somebody says that where there is smoke, fire is not far from there.
All right.
For the longest time, some of us have believed, and with the time we are being vindicated, that the handshake was not about peace, because by the time the handshake was being done, everybody was going on with their business.
All right.
But there was always the thought that the handshake had a political undertone beneath it.
What we are seeing right now.
What we are seeing unfolding.
All right.
And from where I sit, and looking at the problems that have beleaguered Jubilee 2, 2017 to 2022, or the problem that has faced Kenyans after Uhuru took over his second reign, is that from a strategic point of view, I will be of the idea that him coming out to campaign for Raila doesn't help the candidature of Raila Odinga. Because you remember, Raila Odinga, the politician, is a politician who has built the biggest political capital in fighting government and fighting the ills of government. Today, when you listen to Raila Odinga while speaking in a podium, you get lost on what is the core messaging of Raila Odinga.
Right.
Because when he talks about corruption, he gave Sonko a gift the other day. When he talks about when they talk about KEMSA, the people who hate KEMSA work with him everywhere. So now you really don't understand what is the messaging. But now Uhuru Kenyatta has every right, which he should be encouraged to support the candidate of choice he wants. But now we need to talk about how he leaves this nation. If tomorrow Raila doesn't win, where do we go from there? And finally, we need Ben to run away from the thinking that politics should unite people. This is democracy. It is corrosive. It is divisive. That is why people stand where Mark is, I stand on this side. After now the voting day, we come together and say the bigger umbrella here is that we are Kenyans.
Fair enough, fair enough. So that brings me to my next question. Wes, let me start with you. What he has ended there with. What do you think in your analysis, what is your crystal ball telling you? Does the president's presence and weight help the candidature of Raila Odinga?
Yes, to a great extent it does, because the president does have people who support him, and a lot of people who support him. And what did happen, I think that he has a backing. He has a
so there's no lame duck.
He's not, and he was underestimated. And for reasons best known to himself and reasons also known and obvious to Kenyans, when he says, I'm not going to leave this to that person, he knows, or I'm not going to give it to these people, he knows best the reasons why he said that. So what was it again? Because I'm trying to remember. You said, is he...
Is he adding any value to the
yes,
candidature of Raila Odinga?
Especially now that
those who say that he is a lame duck.
Yes, but
it happens when you're coming to the end of it's a theory. Do you agree with it?
Yes, but you know that we just said that Barack Obama also campaigned for Hillary Clinton, and she didn't win, but I'm sure he had an impact on her campaign. So this current president cannot be dismissed. He also has a following, and that following will listen to him.
All right.
Yes.
Madam Wakili, do you agree?
Akili works. Me, I'm one of those people who I own my space regardless.
do you agree? What is your crystal ball telling you about the presence of Uhuru Kenyatta on the Azimio campaign trail?
We have had grumbles from the Azimio campaign that every time the president seems to come out, it doesn't do as much for their campaign as they would have wanted, because some of the failures and the misses by the Jubilee government are then attributed to the handshake part of the Jubilee administration, meaning they become the burden of Raila Odinga to carry while he is trying to present himself as being a clean break from what has been the Jubilee era to now what is going to be the Azimio dispensation. So in that aspect, there has been the disgruntled, it's almost a reluctant acceptance of help from the president. However, we have seen state machinery being used to effect to help the campaign. So, for example, recently when we saw Governor Sonko being asked to come and assist with what was going forward, you can tell that there was somebody who persuaded Sonko to come, because Sonko would not, I do not see him sitting in Mombasa thinking, you know what, let me go to Nairobi and help Polycarp Igathe to become governor. It is something that must have been a back and forth, and I do not think that the Azimio, as a side of government, would have been able to persuade somebody who was a Jubilee candidate to come and offer such help. So you can see that it's not just the overt help of the president that is assisting the campaign. Also, the covert help is assisting the campaign. That has been the criticism about misuse of state machinery, misuse of state resources, government officials being used to assist in the campaign. We've had CSs talking about, we've seen the numbers, we know the results, don't worry, everything is in place. And now that's what the hidden hand of the president in this campaign. But in terms of coming out and speaking out, I think has not been as appreciated as maybe you would have expected. But given the fact that the president has been integral in putting together Azimio, sits as the chairman of the entire coalition, you can tell that even if we do not see him, we understand that his weight is very firmly behind the Azimio candidate, and any successes that you see in the Azimio camp are partly attributable to the participation by the president.
All right. Mark, from a messaging and strategy point of view, what's the impact of Uhuru on the campaign trail?
First, let me just allow me to correct something. It does not take state machinery to talk to Sonko. Sonko joined Wiper of his own volition. I do not think he got a call from any CS or the president to join Wiper, and he went by himself. And Wiper is part of Azimio, and Kalonzo Musyoka has his number. So I don't know where state machinery comes into that play. And let's be a bit fair in that analysis. But going to the messaging.
We saw the pictures of Uhuru and Sonko in Eastlands.
And the magical disappearance of cases and the clearance and the
tomorrow you'll see Sonko being cleared. They were vindicated.
Let's be very clear, okay? Let's be very clear. No, that is not state machinery. It's not state machinery.
Okay. It's too big to
you guys, you will defend your state machinery statement at your time. Let me have my time. So let us go to the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter is the incumbency question, the burden of incumbency. Does it carry a negative or a positive to the Azimio campaign? That is the question. And of course, Uhuru's incumbency comes at a time where we have fuel issues. We've got inflation the world over. It comes after COVID. So there is a burden that he carries. But at the same time, we must be aware that not every Kenyan will blame Uhuru Kenyatta for the cost of fuel, because it is not inherently his fault. And therefore, We must go back to history. If there was an incumbency that was problematic, it was Daniel Toroitich arap Moi's. And he took someone who had 0 votes on the national stage in 2002 and gave him 40-odd%. Now, my question then is, if you take that same 40% that the incumbency carries and give it to Raila Odinga with his 43%, what happens? That is the question you have to ask yourself. Exactly. Because to reduce the support of Uhuru Kenyatta to 0 would be a tactical mistake on anybody's count, because he does have support. Now, whether that support is another 10, 20% towards the Raila Odinga campaign, it is significant. However, at the same time, we need to be very careful, because the reason why we have transitions is people need to feel a sense that the people who are coming in are new and fresh. And then you have to look at the candidacy of Martha Karua, and that's why it's a stroke of genius. Because Martha Karua is a known enemy of Uhuru Kenyatta from the time he was prime minister, from the time she walked away from the Kibaki government to the time where she stood against him, and most recently on the BBI.
I think we should refrain from using words in politics like enemies. I think opponents.
I don't mean sworn enemies like Ukraine.
Let's take a quick commercial break. We're coming back with this. Let's pay our bills a bit. We are back shortly talking about the final weeks, final days of the presidency of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and what he has been up to on the campaign trail, campaigning, drumming up support for the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential candidate Raila Odinga. He has also been up to a lot of things. There is something being called the titling program, where he has been issuing a lot of title deeds across the country, in Nairobi and up country as well. And he has run, or the state has run into some legal and political headwinds with that 410-acre piece of land tussle with Kenyatta University. When we come back, we'll get into that. Don't go too far. This is Front and Center. Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Front and Center. We're discussing the final days, the final weeks of the president, Uhuru Kenyatta's reign as president. And part of that has been, over the last few days, we've seen a tussle, a land tussle, a tussle of some 410 acres of land belonging to Kenyatta University, which the state wanted annexed to a couple of projects, including some by international organization. Part of it was to 180 acres was to go to the Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital, and another 190 acres was to go to resettle quarters. And that did not go down very well with the Vice Chancellor, the former Vice Chancellor of Kenyatta University, Professor Paul Wainaina, and his council. And these elicited some sharp remarks from the head of state. Let's listen.
Ni shamba ya Wakenya. And what this facility is going to do to help us improve healthcare, not just in Kenya, to help us meet emergencies, not just in Kenya, but throughout the African continent. Halafu wewe unaenda kuweka breaks hapo kwa sababu, lakini bado nimebaki wiki 3. We shall deal with those individuals swiftly and effectively.
Indeed, it was swift and effective. A couple of days later, there was heads did roll at Kenyatta University. The Vice Chancellor, Professor Paul Wainaina, did resign. The council was also sent packing. There was video footage of the VC addressing members of staff in tears, really. Let's listen to that in a bit.
The issue is not really a Vice Chancellor's issue. This is a council matter, and therefore, whatever I say, it will not have weight, because I actually has nothing to do property for KU. KU property actually belong to council.
All right, that is the suspended Vice Chancellor, Professor Paul Wainaina. This has led to a debate, a very divisive debate over what should have happened, whether the state did go about it in a proper way, whether what belongs to Kenyatta University is public land and can be annexed at will by the government to do whatever the government of the day feels it should. There are those who say that Professor Paul Wainaina is a hero. It should be celebrated. I want to hear the takes of my panelists in studio tonight. Let me start with you, Bwana Wakili Kipchumba. What's your take on how this was done, basically?
I think Uhuru Kenyatta continues to footnote his regime and how he takes the issues of rule of law, compliance, and respecting institutions. Whereas all of us agree that whatever the purpose for the land, although it has not been disclosed, it was the right thing to be done. But again, there is what Ben we call due process. When we talk about the land that belonged to Kenyatta University, that's a public land that has already been allocated to a public institution. There is a process of annexing it for you to excision of the land to go back to whichever purpose you want to do. And the first process should have been, when you read about when you read through the University KU, the charter, and you read through the University Act, and you reconcile that with the NLC Act, you realize that before you even go to where the president went, the problem with this is the approach that was taken by Kinyua and the people around the presidency. Because the approach was the old KANU approach, where the president has said, you give land. And Gashanja comes writing a letter that he wants these 10 acres, you get a deed plan and that. But now where we are, what was supposed to have been done is, what about the stakeholder engagement? You cannot take land without people participating and telling people we are taking land. And once the council, the university council has already approved that kind of a request, it will go to parliament. Parliament will have to change the user to reallocate the land from KU now to this other person. And then after parliament has already approved, you have to go all the way now to NLC for change of user, because the land as it is, it was public land being used by a public institution. You are going to use it for things like squatters and other things. So NLC had to change user, and then after that now, that is when the other processes of giving, titling and other things will follow. Because you ask yourself, where will the VC, for example, get power to give out a state property? It might be government to government, which is intergovernmental, but there is a due process question here, because when it goes to parliament, that is where issues of public participation will be brought on board. The issues like KU has a master plan, KU has other adjacent things. And the other thing you need to ask yourself, even if KU had a master plan and government has decided that this is the strategic property, what ought to have been done was, you ask KU, you want this land to do this, can you relocate that function to another place? You get it? Or we get this land for this function at some value. Because at the end of the day, public land is to be used for public good. It is not also wise to encourage that, to allow these people to just hold land without using it.
All right, Mesh, what is your take?
I think there is, first of all, let's be very clear, it is public land. And public land, it belongs to the people of Kenya and is held in trust by the government of the Republic of Kenya. This matter, there was a report on it that had also been brought by the Honorable Ole Kenta, the report, I think driven by Honorable Ole Kenta in Parliament. And what is interesting is that from what I've gleaned from the facts that are coming out as we follow so many other things, is that Kinyua, the head of the civil service, had written all the way back in May. So we have this time gap that a letter comes that they must surrender the title deed in order for strategic projects to be put up, like I think the World Health Organization Regional Center, and with other issues regarding the running of the hospital. From May, and from what I heard from the professor as I was watching one of his, he calls a meeting, but it's not coming out very clearly what he did between May and this period. Right. And I don't have all the facts. I'm a bit disturbed that the Law Society of Kenya, of which I am a member of, has stated that one of the reasons they're going to go to court is because there's a history of grabbing of public land. So that's the reason you're going to court, because you're assuming this land has been grabbed, when we have been clearly told, and we want to believe that indeed it is for a partnership, so it's for a strategic project, right, and with the World Health Organization. And I see it as if it goes that way, it will be of more benefit for Kenyans than as it is this way. So it's unfortunate, right, that that's the way that the Law Society took it.
The fact that the National Land Commission, which was brought in by the 2010 Constitution to deal with these issues, seems to have been bypassed. Maybe
now, I'm not saying that you see, we don't have all the I'm telling you that even when I had the former Vice Chancellor speaking, he said, I called a meeting, right, I got a letter from Kenyatta in May, and then the next day we saw some trucks or something, or some lorries coming, and we had some plans. There were gaps. Right. What are these gaps, and why are these gaps there? Okay. Why aren't we getting the entire picture from his point of view, so that we can then make an informed decision and also be able to deliberate on it in an informed manner. All right.
Actually, just a correction on point. I think when the letters that are in public domain, Kenyatta wrote to the VC on 4th of July. So between 4th and when it was supposed to be surrendered on 7th, I think there was nothing meaningful that could have been done. Right. Because even when you read the letters as provided by Kenyatta University, you realize that even in the process was supposed to...
Four petitioners have gone to court challenging the manner in which this was done. Want the courts to prohibit the head of civil service, Joseph Kenyatta, from demanding that KU surrenders the land. Can an institution, a public institution like KU, refuse such an order? I mean, it's a question.
The thing is, and what I've had the former Vice Chancellor saying is, even if you want us to surrender the title, follow due process. And on that, I'm fully in support. And I'm in support of what the Law Society is doing. If you'll remember, during the tenure of Professor Kaimenyi, the government embarked on a very elaborate school titling system. Right. And every school, every public institution, every hospital was given a title deed for the land on which they are supposed to sit on. Why? Because prison land vanished in thin air, school land vanished in thin air, places that were supposed to be set aside for future development of schools and institutions were malls and housing estates. And so we started this school titling program, under which an institution like KU got a title, so that for you to divest them of public land, you have to follow due process, just as if you came to compulsorily acquire my property because you need to build a road. So even today, one of the largest costs when the government is building roads or rails or anything is land compensation, because in Kenya you just cannot take land for whatever use. Even if you're government, there is due process. In the new constitution, we took the bother to establish a National Land Commission because of impunity by the executive on public land. So when the head of public service purports to write a letter in a government that has an attorney general who ought to advise the president on what the legal procedure is, he makes the president look bad, and yet it is up to him to tell the president, look, yes, we want to do this thing and this thing is good, but this is how we need to do it. Because now the president looks like it's a grab and go, and yet the procedure for compulsorily acquiring land is very well laid down. It is not done by a cabinet decision. It is not done by a letter by the civil society. And look at what has happened now. Not only has the previous council resigned, the new council has refused to take office. Now the government has nobody who to write a letter to even move this process forward. So this particular situation has been manhandled. I actually squarely blame the legal advisors of the president, because this thing is in black and white. Right. It is not rocket science. It's not something that they had to imagine. And I thank the chair of the Law Society for actually coming out and saying, you know what, let's put our brakes to this. Yes, eventually we will get to the good part. But before we get to the good part, can we do things right. Because it is important for Kenyans to feel that the law as it is, the constitution as it is, actually counts for something. That the president cannot just stand up and say, you know what, nataka ile na nafungiwa naenda nayo. We have come from too far to go back there.
Mark, the state seems to be running into not only legal headwinds with this, but also political ones in terms of it has caused all sorts of a big storm with words being thrown around, accusations of state capture and land grabbings. What is your take on this?
First and foremost, this has become a prime opportunity for spinners and for people who believe in conspiracy theories to conduct all manner of weird stories concerning this particular land. And the reason why I'm calling it weird is when you look at the crux of the matter, what really matters is what is the land being used for. Purpose number one is to reallocate and relocate squatters. Is that a noble cause? Yes, because in this country we have issues of squatters and they need to be given land. And to be fair, those squatters are already in KU land. They are already there. So it is not something, it's not squatters being moved there. It is giving fellow Kenyans decent accommodation and decent living. Number two, it is making the referral hospital available to the rest of the country. Is this something that is important to be done? Yes, it is. Number three, it is the issue of building a research center which Kenya badly needs. It's regional, it's badly needed. Why? Because COVID has taught us, if we do not have our own research centers, they will go and make medicines elsewhere and we'll be at the back of the line to get those medicines. So at the core of the matter, this is not a land grab. It is an issue of public interest. And as far as the general scope of things is concerned, eminent domain remains with the state in as much as the people who exist therein are fairly compensated and nothing happens illegal. And that is where I agree with the lawyers when they say that there is a due process to be followed. But we must be very careful not to get ourselves into this kind of conspiracy theory that if we build Langata Road, then we must be building it for Weston. If we build a road in Kisumu, we are building it to go to Raila's house. And if we build a road in Chwele, where I come from, it's coming. No, let's not go like this. Why do you like interfering? Let me finish.
We want to help you.
We can't let you look back.
We need to agree. All of us agree. Nobody questions why the land was to be taken. We are on how. Because we are not reinventing the legal way. What we are talking about, there is another puzzle that needs to be filled.
But the LSK reason
in 2007, Kenyatta University went to court suing Kimani, Mbugua, and 78 others, those squatters. What did Justice Komingoi say? He gave a permanent injunction that land belongs to Kenyatta University. When now you come through executive fiat and you give the same squatters where a court of law has gone for more than 5 years, has gone through the wheels, and you come through, where does that leave us with compliance with court orders? The other point we need to ask is this. We have there is something Mark Bichachi is running away from. The animal known as state capture. State capture is what we've been talking about here.
State capture its own things?
Madam, give me time.
No, I mean, how does state capture?
Yes,
please explain.
State capture
how do you capture yourself?
In a minute, please.
In a normal place, we should have asked this in stakeholder engagement about this land. The question that should have been asked is, NLC, do you have any other land within Nairobi that these facilities can be built? But because there is a strategic investment by a private Kenyan there, which needs people to be hyped around for people to have dwellings there, it had to be done in KU University. So at the end of the day, let us not mix national interest with personal interest. And the reason why even the comment of effectively and swiftly came in place is because it must be done within this regime. We know for whose interest.
All right, I'll come on.
I need half a minute.
I need half a
minute to just say this. the judgment that came out in 2007 for the squatters, the squatters were awarded a portion of the KU land and were awarded 30 acres.
Yeah,
but in this accession, the accession for the squatters was 190 acres.
Yes.
So who needs the extra allocation? Because we're asking about the process.
What is the current,
we're asking about the process. We have institutions. For example, the Agricultural Hospital.
Let's
and the Agricultural Hospital has a
JR.
teaching unit.
Yes.
The Moi University also has MTRH. You don't need a separate title for the hospital to continue operating. It is already open and accessible to the public. So you have to look at the timing. And I agree with Oliver. The timing being so close to the end makes you wonder why the urgency, why the overages.
I don't think there is. This matter has been debated.
Right. You know, I didn't
and that's why I'm
table
saying,
in Parliament.
If the legal advisors of the president had advised him that this is a process, he would have kick-started it and trusted the institutions to complete what is due and good for Kenya. But when you start looking like it is a certificate of urgency and it is exercising fiat, then somebody has to ask, look, how do you award somebody 30 acres? Then you excess 190. That's how things used to happen. The government would say, we are accessing this forest land, we take 10 acres, people take 100.
But you see, here's the thing, and this is the question that everyone here is running away.
Does the CE have to be something? The University Council have to be
let me make my statement clear. Number one, I am 100% behind building a referral center and a research center in this country. I am 100% behind the idea which both William Ruto and Raila Odinga have talked about. In fact, William Ruto talked about 1 million acres in Trans Nzoia just the other day to resettle squatters. This was, what, 2 days ago in Trans Nzoia. So he talked about the same issues. Why are they talking about the same issues? Why would William Ruto say that he wants to get 1 million acres in Trans Nzoia? Because we have an issue of resettling Kenyans. And the truth is, it is not a 1 acre problem. If we are going to talk about 190 acres, let us compare those 190 acres to the 1 million acres that William Ruto wants to do. Is he also willing to grab 1 million acres?
Which university has been dissolved?
No, let me finish.
Because you are mixing apples and mangoes. They can the problem is
finished.
We are questioning due process. There are no problem.
We have to have the quorum.
My point is, I'm saying, and I'm trying to disperse this conspiracy theorizing, okay? If someone says, and the government says, that we need 190 acres, we cannot sit on a national TV show and decide it is a land grab. We must look at the plans.
Nobody is calling it a land grab. We are saying, what are the incidental things? Just, Ben, let me clarify something. Today, government buys land in, let's say, Loitoktok. Where it buys that land, where the government has land in Loitoktok, and what do I do in between? I go and establish and build rental units there. When the government land is there, it is idle. When I have built my rental units, I say government should establish a KMTC. Are we establishing that KMTC for public interest or for my personal interest? So at the end of the day, we need to look. And then the other thing is this. Let me just say this then about timelines. The issue of excision of public land did not start today. There is one that happened in Marsabit, not Marsabit, Isiolo, where the airport is, between the Ministry of Livestock and the Ministry of Transport. There is one that was in Kirinyaga, between county government of Kirinyaga and Kemri. It is not a new phenomenon. That's why I'm telling Mark Bichachi, there is no urgency. The public interest in Kenyatta today remains even to Kenyatta. This fight of opening projects so that you
let me be the moderator here. Mheshimiwa, talk to me about the accusations of state capture and land grabbing. Do they have do they hold any water? Is it
yes,
just
of course they
theories?
do. The issues of state capture are very, very real in this country, and state capture, even within the legislature, of ensuring that you have people who are of questionable character, who don't fit any sort of integrity tests are there, so that you can control the outcomes of everything that will happen in this country. The laws, you can control the judiciary, and you will control the executive. That is a very eminent and present threat in this country.
Do you see any such questions with this Kenyatta University?
No, absolutely not. Not with that. And I think that if I may say, I think I was one of the first people to comment on something on Twitter and say state capture, and then you know how it is, everyone takes up the same. But but yes, state capture is very real. It's a threat. It's an absolute threat to this country of ours called Kenya. And it's a discussion we can have for another day. I can talk about it for hours and hours and hours.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So the final, we need to wind up on this. Mark, you wanted to say something. Before
it's
we get
very
the
simple.
Final remarks.
The issue of the process does not equal a land grab. This is
that's
my
what
issue.
yes,
because that logical jump that simply does not exist. It comes from a political point where you're trying to score cheap political points in a process that is actually good for Kenyans, and that is where it is a shame, because there is no way you can tell me that if squatters are resettled, then Kenyans are worse for it. There's no way you can tell me if we have a medical research facility, Kenyans are worse for it. We can question the process all the day long, and I agree.
So there's a question here.
Due process must be followed.
Joy mentioned that you needed 30 acres to resettle the Kamai squatters.
Listen,
what do you need?
The court pronounced itself and said there are 30 acres to be given to the squatters that are there. Now, is the government responding to the need of those squatters only, or it's also responding to the needs of the squatters that it is national?
Exactly.
Because the government has scope of the entire. How many IDPs are we still yet to settle? For example.
Exactly.
For example,
that's
because
true.
you want to assume to assume the powers of the Almighty to know the entire scope of the thing, and assume that because
let me just say something.
There's some acrobatics that I'm hearing here with Mark that I cannot understand.
Yes, Ben,
how we come to
this
190 acres now is supposed to resettle.
No,
because listen, but why are you assuming the same government that during COVID had the balls to actually demolish people's homes during COVID, and now they're suddenly so concerned about all the squatters that need to be resettled in Kenya? You know, there's some things that, quite frankly, even if the thing is this:
the government should not be concerned.
If the court has pronounced itself and said 30 acres,
and they're giving them extra,
and this was done in 2007, a decision that has not been appealed.
All right.
And a decision that has not only been appealed, but those squatters are still living on that land. They're not being evicted. KU was not evicting them.
Right.
A situation that has even made an entire university now sitting without a council. Quite frankly, if somebody doesn't see that this is a man-made disaster.
Let me say something.
And as you do that, please make your final remarks.
Yes.
Right.
I think what we need to agree is this, Ben. This country is a country, we are people built and established on rule of law. We have no problem with Uhuru Kenyatta exiting. The country will not end on 9th when we vote for a new president. The problems we have today are problems that will continue being there. What we need is due process. The other thing, you cannot take public land without stakeholder engagement. In stakeholder engagement, we will ask, why does WHO need 30 acres and not 10? Why does WHO need 30 acres and not 50? We will ask, where do these squatters of 190 acres go? What are they and who are they? And where did they come from? We will ask, is it a must for the Africa Research Center to be in KU, near where somebody is building a billion property? Right. So at the end of the day, we have no problem with the spirit. We are questioning how we have arrived at the spirit.
We have to leave it there. Mheshimiwa, 1 minute, your final remarks.
My final remarks are simply where we began and where we started was is the President's role in endorsing and assisting or championing the presidential candidature of Raila Amolo Odinga, that going forward for all of us, for all Kenyans, we have a right to support whoever it is we want to support, but do so with respect and integrity, and remember that our leaders are not enemies, but opponents and competitors.
Thank you. Joy, your final remarks?
I would state that in this particular situation, one thing we need to understand is that the interests of Kenyatta University as an institution also have to feature in this entire equation. It's important to have the WHO, it's important to have all these other people, but Kenyatta University already exists, and they said that they did present to Cabinet a master plan of what they want to use for that land. So I agree with Oliver, the issue of public participation needs to start with the people already occupying that land before they develop it. And secondly, in this dispensation, any action that you take or do not take has a bearing on what's going to happen in the next 25 days. In this move that the president is doing, being an unpopular move as it is, we go back to the point that Mark was making about the burden of incumbency. Because now these moves will be seen as more unpopular moves that at the end of the day will have a bearing on how the election pans out. So the president's advisors really ought to employ a little bit more strategy and tact in trusting institutions to do their work. Set the ball rolling and trust the process that eventually you'll arrive at your intended destination.
Mark, 40 seconds, your final remarks.
I think the most important thing that Kenyans must learn is we cannot politicize development. And this is the most dangerous thing. When we were building the expressway, the same people told us, ni barabara ya wadosi. We've seen matatus on that road and what they've done, meaning it was not barabara ya wadosi. Number two, there was a complaint about SGR. It will never made money. Where are those people now when the SGR has made profit? Let me tell Kenyans this. Development is for our good. Our politicians will make statements, create conspiracy theories for the sake of winning political points while we lose out on development. If this was happening in Rwanda, I tell you the first stone for that research center would already have been put. But in Mark. Kenya, we want to politics.
We have to leave it there. Mark Bichachi, communication strategist and political analyst, lawyer and political analyst Joy Divo, nominated member of parliament, and lawyer Jennifer Shamala, and lawyer and political strategist Kipchumba Karori. These are a show of clever people. So we leave it on front and center tonight. We shall continue to follow what the president is doing, covering, of course, the latest on the campaign trail as we head into the August 9th general election in the next 25 days. Be sure to join us every Thursday night from around 9:35 p.m. here on NTV and on www.ntvkenya.co.ke as we dissect and analyze for you, make sense for you, the biggest political and governance issues in the Republic. I am Ben Kitili. Good night from Nairobi.